Good morning, fellow gardeners. Welcome to our Designing Waterwise Gardens presentation. This presentation is being presented by the Master Gardeners of Placer County. My name is Barbara Villarreal, and I will be your moderator today. Our presenter today is Marianne Calhoun. She has been a Master Gardener since 2019. Take it away, Marianne.
All right. Thank you, Barbara. So again, my name is Marianne Calhoun. I'm very happy to be with you today and to share what I have learned about designing Waterwise gardens. So just a little bit about myself. I was born on the East Coast and moved out west more than 30 years ago. And after retiring, I got very interested in studying landscape design and horticulture. And then I joined the Master Gardeners. And what prompted me to really focus in on Waterwise Gardens is when we bought a property in 2015, it's in Granite Bay, there was a mandate to reduce water by 40%. So that was a huge impetus to what do we need to do? And I'm very happy to share with you tips I've learned, photos, as well as really important resources, so you can consider it yourself. Then about the Master Gardener program, as you probably all know, we are volunteers. You may not realize that we're trained and that we're organized by counties. So here in Placer County, we're really happy there's over 150 of us who are out there and more than happy to help share information to home gardeners and help you make informed decisions. In terms of where to find us online, we have a wonderful website with lots of info. And I just want to call your attention to one publication that's free. It's a quarterly newsletter called Curious Gardener. And you simply can add your email and you can have it given to you each quarter. But it just came out in early June. And then the articles themselves get placed in another section of the website so that you can search by articles, topics. Then in terms of where to find us, I want to point out farmers markets. In case you hadn't realized, the Master Gardeners have a booth. And these days we have it in 3 different places: Auburn, Lincoln, and Roseville. So it's a great place to ask your questions in person and while you're out shopping, buying seasonal produce. Now, I'd like to learn a little bit about yourself. So please just raise your hand and share. Have you learned which of your trees can thrive with low water? So glad to see many of you have. How about created a scale plan of your property? Not so many. How many of you keep information about your plants and their characteristics? Seems like many of you. How about downsizing your lawn? Have you done that to only a flat plane in the full sun? I'm glad to see there's one person that's done that. And how about placing plants? Have you put them in high, moderate, and low water zones? So some of you have, which is fantastic. So this is a good intro to what we're going to talk about. And I have organized this presentation. So there's 6 steps for how do you design a Waterwise garden. And I want to call your attention to the fact that selecting plants is the last step. So before you think about plants, you really need to think big picture about your landscape, figure out what your existing trees are, prepare a base plan, consider downsizing your lawn and designing irrigation zones. And then you get the fun part of picking plants. So step number 1 is assessing your landscape. This is a photo of the house my husband and I purchased in 2015. from their original owners. As you can see, a lot of overgrown shrubbery as well as other things. And what you can do at your own landscape is, yes, look from the property lines in towards your house, see what see what you have, think about it, as well as stand at your windows and your doorways and look out. And while you're doing this, consider things like shrubs. Are they blocking views from your windows? Do you have trees that are overhanging the roof? Are there views that you want to screen? Are there views that you want to enhance? And overall, think about the ratio. What's your private space considered a public space to your semi-private spaces? And is that something you might want to change? Then very particularly look at your grass. Where is it unhappy? And are there areas that it's thriving? So it's usually easier to find out where it's unhappy. It might be on a slope, such as in this photo. It might be in shady areas. There might be paths that are trodden across the grass, suggesting there might be a place for a path, a proper path. And grass might also be competing with roots. So these are just a few of the areas that the grass you can assess to see what you have. Step number 2, just going to go through researching your existing trees. Now, it's really important to collect information, and you'll want to know the plant's names. Very important, you want to know the water needs, and we'll go through exactly how to do that. You want to collect info about the preferred light, the size range. And then one thing is you can simply Google what's the origin. And that will give you a really good clue as to what environment your tree would thrive in. In terms of figuring out the water needs, there's a wonderful website that's housed at UC Davis. And the acronym is WUCLS, which really means Water Use Classification of Landscape Species. Now, this has been created just for California. And all you need to do is enter what city you live in and either the common name or scientific name. And you will immediately find out what's the water need in your area, as well as lots of other info about your tree. So while you're collecting info, you might also think about collecting what's the plant family. Is your tree evergreen? What's the texture, the shape? Does it have seasonal interest? Does it attract birds and bees and butterflies? And then very important is to know what your soil is. And in our area, it's generally either clay or sandy loam, or different parts of your property might have different bits, but just a very generalistic approach to, you need to know what conditions you have and what your trees want to thrive in. So here's an example of how I collected the info for my trees. I first created a column about the water need, then the names, the light, the size range, the origin. And lastly, I had a column about, did we want to keep it or remove it? So you can see that I learned that birch trees are high water. Monterey pines are inappropriate for our area. Trees that were moderate water or wanted water, moderate water, Chinese tallow trees, Japanese maple, Japanese black pine. And what was really good to know is that crepe myrtles were low water. And even better are that native oak trees are very low water. So this is just an example of how I collected the info. So step number 3, once you know You've looked at your property overall, you've researched your existing trees. Now you need to prepare a base map. And you don't need to be worried. You don't need to be a landscape designer or have a landscape design app. What you really need is a black and white piece of paper showing your house in relationship to the street and other properties with a scale. So if you're lucky, in your real estate records, you might already have what's known as a plat. Otherwise, you can just go onto a mapping app that's on your computer. This one here, the black and white, is Google Maps. So it's very easy to just take a screenshot and print that out. But when you're taking the screenshot, what you need to do is include the scale that's found at the bottom. And so it doesn't matter what size piece of paper you have. You can go to a print shop and get larger sizes, but you will always know the scale. I'm going to show you another example. This is from Google Earth, which is another free app, and my house. This is actually the image that Google Earth uses is, I can just tell looking at it, is after I had done a lot of landscaping. But anyway, with Google Earth, you can put in your property lines, and obviously it tells you a lot more than just the house in relationship to the street. So once you have a piece of paper that you've created, printed out, you want to add things. You want to add your property lines. You want to figure out what direction north is. And if you don't know, your phone, like my iPhone, might have a compass, and it will tell you very quickly where north is. And then you want to add 5-foot increments to your scale, because this will help you draw things on the base map. You want to draw both hardscape as well as softscape. Hardscape are things like your driveway, your patios, your swimming pool, anything that's permanent and built. Softscape is all your plant materials. And in this case, you really just need to do existing trees or maybe some very large shrubs. So this is an example of how I approached it. But this is the fun part. You have your black and white, where's the house, where's the street? And then you just get tracing paper and you start playing. You use colored pencils, color markers, whatever you want, and start thinking about what might you want, what might you want to change. So in my case, we're on a corner. So screening became really important. So I did all these squiggle lines around the edges of how to screen things. The paths, I thought there was opportunities there to put in some more paths than had been. The lawn wanted to shrink to a really small sort of central space. But everybody has their own wish list. And as I said, have fun. So now we're going to talk about your lawn. As you probably know, grass is incredibly thirsty and uses the most amount of water for your outdoor irrigation. What you might not know is that the best lawn, that's the happiest lawn, is actually what's on a flat plain, is in the full sun, and to be water-wise, you're using drought-tolerant grass. And the best shape, which I learned in my design classes, is actually a square or a series of squares. And the reason for that is, envision a square. You have 4 corners, they're equidistant, and all you need are 4 sprinkler heads in order to get the most efficient head-to-head coverage with your irrigation. So in this next picture, you will see that I did not follow what I learned in design class, but we dramatically reduced the lawn from approximately 3,300 square feet to just over 500. The lawn is now on a flat plane. It's in the full sun, and we use sod that's a drought-tolerant grass. So in the next photo, before we get the next photo, well, that's the next photo. You will see that 5 years later, things have really changed. I'm going to go back to lessons learned. So the first lesson is that no matter how much curves aesthetically are pleasing, they are not efficient. And placing sprinklers along curves is every sprinkler is going to be different, and you are not going to get a nice, efficient watering pattern. So highly recommend that you consider a series of squares for your lawn. Then the second big lesson learned was about shrubs. Well, let me restate that, plant material. If you put perennials and small shrubs around your lawn, they'll be very happy. But if you put large shrubs, within a couple of years, you probably will find, like I did, it creates a lot of shade because things want to grow both taller and wider, and they're constantly encroaching on the grass. So here's a photo. You can see on one side, the grasses and the small perennials are very happy, no problem interacting with the grass. But on the other side, which is where we place shrubs for privacy from the street, the shrubs are really large. So they're too large, and one constantly has to trim them back. So those are two big lessons I want to share. So now we're going to move on to designing irrigation zones. And an irrigation zone is also just sometimes called zones, or the technical term is hydrozone. But what it all means is that you want to place plants in one zone that are sharing the similar water and exposure needs. So a good example is lawn. If you don't have lots of shade on one side, that's an easy one hydrozone, and it has one valve that waters it. When you're thinking about multiple irrigation zones, you want to group them, or you want to have them around your existing trees. So trees that need moderate or high water need to be grouped separately than ones with low water. And a last tip is, just for fun, consider naming your zone. So for example, at my house, right outside the front door, I have the Asian entry garden. And then on the slope along the front path, I call it the Mediterranean front slope. So it's very clear what kind of plant material is there, and probably how much water they get. So here's a statement I learned from our Master Gardener training, which is that the goal of water conserving design is to reduce the water application to the minimum required for your landscape. And it's important to know, by doing this, it doesn't preclude you from using high water use plants, but it just limits its use. So a very easy graphic to help understand Waterwise gardens and zones is plants that need high water should be a very small portion of your property. Moderate water can be more. But the largest square footage of your property should be using low water. So that's, as I said, a very simplistic way to think about Waterwise gardens. Then as you're contemplating your zones, it's good to think about firescaping. Now, firescaping is landscaping to prevent fires. And as you probably have all heard in recent years, the first 5 feet from your house is the most important defensible space for the firemen. So this is a great place to have hardscape and well-irrigated small plants. The next zone from your house up to 30 feet is a great place to have your downsized lawn, groups of low water plants, and having permeable paths around your groupings of plants. And then the furthest zone from your house is where you want your larger, very well spaced, low water shrubs, and definitely your shade trees to be away from the house. So that's firescaping, just very general. And now we're going to blend considerations both for firescaping with Waterwise. And in doing so, we find that moderate and high water zones should help you with creating defensible space around your house. It should just be a few areas, the closest to your house. And then the low water zones should be the ones that have more square footage and are further away. And one element that we learned from firescaping is to have permeable hardscape around your zones. Permeable means that the water can go through, like the rain. It's not concrete that doesn't allow you to absorb the water. So here's an example of how I determined multiple zones in the front of our house. So we have a half acre, we're on a corner, and we had lots of trees. So the shaded areas represent many of the oak trees that we had, the native oaks, and then a whole grove of birch trees and other kinds of trees, crepe myrtles. And then the trick was to play around with what are those spaces both around the trees and sort of in between, and how to create zones that are just watered by one irrigation valve. So this is a very simplistic drawing by color of how our zones are today. Started off with high water zones for the lawn and the birch trees. But when the birch trees died, it became a really great opportunity to start tweaking the water and getting the grass and the plants that were there used to moderate water versus high. So today, those areas, we have blueberries, gardenias, and the lawn. And the low water areas are surrounding the crepe myrtles and the oak trees. So they're quite distinct. And the design trick was to plant plants that weren't a huge contrast from one area to another. Okay, so now we're going to introduce the topic of plants. Step number 6, what you've been waiting for. So there are many ways to get inspired in thinking about what water-wise plants you might want to use. Neighbors might have already downsized their lawn. New commercial plantings might be a really good place to look. There are public gardens that you might not realize are labeled water efficient landscapes. And in Placer County, we have 2 of them. One is the Placer Nature Center, and the other is at the San Juan Water District. And in Sacramento County, there are even more. So you can research that. But the main tip I would give is that when you're looking at other plantings, really figure out which low water plants are thriving in the middle of our hot summer. Then if they're thriving then, they'll be great all year long. And as you envision new plants that are low water, there's just some basic design principles to think about. That deciduous trees are the best for shade and best placed in the southwest or the west corner of your house. If you want to create privacy, think about a variety of flowering shrubs. If you want color, think about putting colorful perennials along your pathways. Then if you like containers, this is a really great place to think about succulents and succulent-like plants. For example, in my house, we only water once or twice a week for the containers because they, in our hot summers, use a lot of water and you have to be home, or someone has to be home every day. Then again, from a design point of view, think about your garden in layers, horizontally. We have a foreground, a middle ground, a background, and vertically, there's a ground, a middle, and a canopy. So lots of things to think about in the background as you're contemplating new plants. So I'd like to share some photos of plants that have done well at my house. And I actually have a little samples that I've went and clipped today. So the first place I look for plants are the ones that are native here in California. The manzanita and ceanothus, there's many, many varieties and sizes available. And I want to point out one plant you might not be familiar with, which is the toyon. So today in mid-June, these are the flower buds. They are just about to open and they'll be white. And so it's a really wonderful plant for midsummer. And by November, those flowers will be red berries that you'll have just in time for Christmas. Then after thinking about California plants, I like to look at plants from Australia. I found that they're wonderful plants that are very happy in our climate and using low water. And one of the plants, again, I just picked it today, is a grevillea. So this is an example. It's very spiky. It works great for privacy. And they have these really unusual flowers. But grevilleas come in lots of sizes and colors, so they're a great thing to look out for. And Lomandra is my favorite grass-like, but not a grass. Again, it comes in lots of sizes and colors and variety. And coast rosemary is something else to look for. Then lastly, after looking at plants from California and ones from Australia, then I go to the Mediterranean plants. And hopefully you're all familiar with the yellow Jerusalem sage, the bush germander, which blooms for almost 6 months, and the chaste tree, which is great for butterflies. And then one plant, it's not from Mediterranean, but I wanted to show you that I selected today, is the pineapple guava. And if you don't know this, it's a wonderful plant that's very happy in low water. And the thing that's unusual, it's edible. It had just finished flowering. So it's just starting to create its fruit. And by end of the fall, you'll have amazing, wonderful fruit. So good plant, pineapple guava. So just as you did with the trees, I suggest that you collect all your information about the low water plants that you're finding and being attracted to. Again, think about collecting the names, the exposure, the sizes, the origin, the plant family. Find out if it's evergreen, texture, shape, seasonal interest. And then you'll also probably want to know if it attracts wildlife or not. And some considerations from the design side is, in order to have year-round interest, you definitely want plants that complement your house. You also want them to be mostly evergreen, have a variety of textures, and have interest in every season. And not only interest for people, but also for wildlife. And then a good rule of thumb to think about in order to have your garden look unified instead of having one of many different kinds of plants, is that if you have a small tree, you think of having 1 to 3 of them. When you selecting a flowering shrub, maybe 3 to 5. And then herbaceous plants, think even more. So again, instead of having one of many different plants, your garden will look more unified if you use fewer ones in more places. And lastly, you may live in a community that you need your HOA to approve it. So you need to factor in that step. So here's some photos of my property after 5 years. So the lawn on the front is now only watered twice a week. My Mediterranean front slope is just watered once a week. And the foreground, where I have roses, blueberries, and actually in the summer, we're now growing vegetables. It's just watered twice a week. This is a look along the street, which now has wonderful privacy with a variety of shrubs and ground covers. That's just watered once a week. And another photo along our driveway where there used to be no vegetation between ourselves and our neighbors, is that area is now just watered once a week. So as a review, when you're thinking about creating a Waterwise garden in your house, just think of these 6 steps: assessing, researching, preparing a basement plan, consider downsizing your lawn. Definitely want to design multiple irrigation zones. And then lastly, have fun selecting your Waterwise plants. And these are the resources that I've used and highly recommend. UC Davis, as I mentioned earlier, houses the database that tells you the water needs of plants. It also has lots and lots of other resources. Then at the Arboretum at UC Davis, if you haven't already visited, fabulous place to go. And again, they have lots of resources online. The Native Plant Society for California, again, has a great website. And along with the Arboretum, their databases are easily searchable to help you narrow your choices of what you want. Then lastly, even if you don't live in the Placer County Water Agency's district, I highly recommend that you check out their website. They have lots of resources that they direct you to, not only for Waterwise gardening, but also Firewise landscaping. Now, all these resources can be found on the handout that we are giving you. Oh, and before we end, just want to suggest to you that there are other presentations you might be interested in attending. And we really appreciate feedback, knowing what kinds of presentations do you want to hear. So here's just a sampling of ones that we have given before and are happy to give in the future. Composting, removing the lawn, improving water efficiency, doing a deeper dive into native plants or pollinator-friendly gardening, talking about edibles, both fruit trees and veggies. And lastly, integrated pest management. So again, these are just a sample of the things that we offer, and we appreciate your feedback as to what you would want to learn about. So that's it. Really appreciate your time today and the opportunity to share things I've learned, and hope that you will are very successful in creating Waterwise gardens at your property.
That's all for today, folks. Thank you, Marianne, for sharing valuable information on designing Waterwise gardens. That was really great. If you run into problems in your garden or just have a question, you can click on the Ask a Master Gardener link on the left-hand column of our website homepage. Remember, if you live in a different county or area of the world while watching this presentation, be sure to consult your local master gardeners or other experts about geographical or climate differences in your garden. We hope to see you soon at another virtual or in-person presentation. Check out our list of previously recorded presentations or our schedule of upcoming presentations on our website as listed here, pcmg.ucanr.org. Thank you, everyone. Bye for now.
Okay, bye.